BBC Asian Network.
Mubin Azhar.
This is me, yes it is, and we like to talk. So tonight we are asking quite a specific question. We're talking about hair, but not just any old hair. We're talking about hair in the context of the Sikh faith. And in particular, we're asking, if you remove your hair, does it make you any less of a Sikh? So it's quite a loaded question, and I guess there's a political aspect to that. And I think it can be relevant in other faiths as well. It can absolutely, and we'll get onto all that in a little bit. I'm really pleased to have with me now Jasmin and Damneet Kaur, who are from Decolonize Your Body. Welcome, guys. It's really good to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you for having us.
For anyone that doesn't know and hasn't heard, explain Decolonize Your Body. Tell me about that.
So Decolonize Your Body is a spoken word and arts kind of event that myself and my friend Jasmin Kaur began in New York. So just this past December, I was just heading to New York to see my friend, and we decided that it would be nice to do something art related while we were both in the same space. So Decolonize Your Body just came out as an idea between the two of us, and we didn't really know where it was going. But then we hosted this event in Brooklyn just this past December, and the response was so beautiful. We had women of different backgrounds, different communities come out, perform, share art, share spoken word, sing, perform hip hop. And we were just like in awe of the way that people engaged with this concept of decolonization. So the title itself, Decolonize Your Body, it comes from an illustration that I did a couple of years ago. And in this drawing, you see a Sikh woman, and her skin tone is visibly brown. Not that kind of like lightened brown that you see in a lot of South Asian art that really looks white. And she had visible facial hair. So for context, many practicing Sikhs choose to keep their hair from head to toe intact as a means of accepting the way the divine created us, as a way of celebrating our natural form, as a form of self-acceptance. So in this drawing, you see this woman with brown skin and hair on her face. And the idea is that she is taking back her body on her own terms and decolonizing her body.
So the idea is kind of shifted from those L'Oreal Perfect, other brands are available,
Exactly.
but those kinds of ideals of beauty, it's taking it away from that, reclaiming it, and saying, actually, there's another way to look at this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really where it came from. And then when we created this event, we didn't want to just have our own perspective pushed onto an audience. Instead, I brought my own experiences. Gagan brought her own experiences. All the women in that space from, like I said, different communities brought their own experiences. And then through that, we were able to understand the term decolonization on our own terms, through our own lived experiences, not just through academic language, but through what we've lived through as women of color. So that's really where it came from. And then we had the privilege of bringing it on tour. So this summer we got to go to Australia. We got to host the show in 3 different cities with myself and Damneet Kaur. And now we're here. And we just hosted it this past Friday in London, and it was awesome. And we're heading to Birmingham on Friday.
Very good. Damneet, I want to bring you in. Can you tell me about the whole concept of gesh? Like, why is it important in Sikhism?
I think gesh, the way it's pronounced.
Gesh with an S. We were having this little discussion beforehand. We were saying, is it gesh? Or because I've heard it both ways, but gesh, yeah?
It's important because, right, your body is natural, and your body has natural hair. And the Gurus taught us that in order to accept yourself as the divine created you, one must keep it. And so, yeah, that is the concept of gesh, is to keep the body hair that you are born with.
Okay, and so tell me, I think both of you, if I'm correct in saying this, would have a different practice in that. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
So tell me how that works practically in your lives, and tell me about your journey to get to the point of where you are. So Damneet first, please.
So my journey, I would say, it's been hard for me to keep gesh. I'm also not Amritari, and Jasmin can explain that because that is her lived experience. But for me, myself, I think as someone who lives in a Western society, it was really hard for me to understand what gesh meant, especially because most of the time I I also did not grow up in a predominantly Sikh community. So, and my parents didn't really enforce religion. They wanted us to first kind of understand who we are as people. So when I came into Sikhi at a later age, which was in high school, I started to understand why it was important for me to just accept my body and love it. And I think that is also a form of decolonizing, is being able to be okay in my body. And so, yeah, I think that would be my experience with keeping body hair. But also, you know, I think it's a hard process when you live in a Western society that makes you feel like you're not beautiful if you don't shave. You're not beautiful if you don't look a certain type of way. And so it's been a hard process, and it's still a constant process of decolonizing and also coming into Sikhi. But I think I do it in my own manner, that I wake up every day and I remind myself where I'm at in that process and how I can be a better Sikh.
So can I be very specific? So tell me about what are those boundaries and lines? Like, would you remove certain hair? Would you not remove certain hair?
I go with what I'm comfortable with at the moment. I remember I used to remove all of my body hair, especially shaving my arms. And I've talked about that before. And I think, you know, a lot of other Sikh women probably could relate to things like that. And so I go with what I'm comfortable with, whether it's like I've grown out my arm hair now, and people will look at it, you know, because we're not used to seeing hairy arms on women. So I think it's asking myself what I'm comfortable with, and also why I'm comfortable with keeping certain hair, why it's not, if it's because I don't feel beautiful. And then also, you know, questioning why I don't feel beautiful at times. And if I do feel beautiful, then being okay with that.
So, Damneet, is there an aspiration kind of down in a few months, a few years? Is there an aspiration that one day, you know, you use the phrase decolonized? Is the idea that you will be so decolonized that you will be confident enough to have all the natural hair that has been given to you?
I think that is hard to answer at the moment because, like I said, decolonizing is a constant process, right?
Go on, get your crystal ball out. Go on, answer the question.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever reach that, you know? I think we'll see in 10 years, 20 years. But at the moment, I think decolonizing is that I feel beautiful at the moment in how I am.
Okay, and Jasmin, tell me about your experience, because I understand and I've read you have a different practice. So tell me what that practice is.
So I grew up in a very different community than Damneet, which is really interesting because we have a lot of overlap in our experiences, but a lot of difference as well. So where Damneet grew up in an area where there were literally no Punjabis, I grew up in Abbotsford, which is very close to Surrey, which is like Punjab. So I grew up around a lot of Punjabis, but I also grew up within like a very large Amritari community as well. I grew up going...
For anyone that doesn't know, sorry, and that includes me, what's an Amritari community?
So Amritari means to be a baptized Sikh.
Right.
So within a community of Sikhs who were baptized. So I grew up going to these kind of programs and having a family that was very immersed in that community. So I grew up never cutting my hair per se, but not necessarily being Amritari. I wasn't always baptized. So this is really something that I chose for myself when I was in high school. I remember when I was younger though, at the age of 7 is when I started being conscious of my body hair. I was in ballet and there was this girl in my class who pointed out the hair on my arms. And she was just like, wow, you are so hairy. And I was 7 years old.
I can relate to that.
And I was like, wow, I have hair on my arms. And I realized it in that moment that I was different and it wasn't okay for me to be different. So I think I started becoming self-conscious at that point.
I just want to be very specific. The girl that pointed it out and you say you were different, were you different because you simply weren't removing hair, or you were different because you're of Punjabi origin, so you've got dark hair that shows up more, and this was a white girl? Like, what was the context?
Yep. So she was a white girl, and I had visibly dark hair on my light brown skin. So I think that's what she was noticing, and then that's what I was noticing as well. So these kind of ideas were planted in my mind when I was a primary school student, and then I kept my hair, but I was very self-conscious. So when I entered high school, obviously that's a point when everyone is super awkward. So in grade 9, I remember I started bleaching my hair because I wanted to keep it, but I couldn't deal with it being visible. And I had this white friend in that year who told me that I would look way better if I just started like removing my hair, and I became like super tuned into what she was saying. So that's kind of what I did. And then I remember I would bleach my hair, but I would like hate the process because it like burned. So then in June of that year, I decided to just like skip bleaching my hair just for the sake of the inconvenience of it being taken away. So just for the sake of like convenience, I stopped. And I was at home for the whole summer, so I wasn't really dealing with strangers judging me and all sorts of things. At the end of the summer though, I went on a trip to Disneyland with my family, and I was kind of like, do I really want to like be in a public space looking different, looking visibly hairy? And I decided to just see what would happen. Like what could be the worst possible thing that happens if I go to America and have facial hair as a 9th grader. And the trip sucked. And
was it terrible?
Oh, it was terrible. It was
what kind of stuff? Go on, give me specifics.
Okay. So I noticed people like staring at me and just kind of like looking me up and down. And then I was kind of like, is it in my head? Is it like really happening? But then there was this point where I realized it was like not just in my head. There were these guys and they looked like they were about in their 20s. And bear in mind that I am this like tiny little like 9th grader. But they were all staring at me and then pointing at like my facial hair, pointing at like my hair on my upper lip. And I was at this like awkward 9th grader age where I'm just trying to like plant some seeds of confidence in myself, and these guys just destroyed it. And I was at that point when I was like, okay, you know what, forget this. I tried, I gave it a shot, I tested this out, I'm going to just remove all my hair now. And then I just happened to, right after that trip, head over to like a course camp. So that's like a camp for Sikh girls and women.
And how old were you at this point?
I was 14.
Okay,
14.
so really young in those formative ages.
Yeah. So I headed to this camp, and that was the first time I actually ever was surrounded by so many like Sikh girls, and I was just in awe of how comfortable everyone was in their own bodies. And it was at that point where I was like, hey, like it is possible to live in this body and to be okay with it and to celebrate myself and not just have to change myself in order to satisfy everyone else's needs. So then that's kind of where I decided to consciously start keeping my hair and not just kind of like passively do it.
And you haven't looked back.
And I feel like, you know, self-acceptance is like not a linear journey. It's like an up and down kind of thing. And there's definitely been points since then when I have not been comfortable in my skin. And I'll share that through the spoken word piece I share later on. But that was the foundation for where I had to start from. And since then, it's been a process of getting to know myself and being aware of what I'm feeling in the moment that I'm feeling it. But I stopped bleaching my hair after that, which is really interesting. And now I still work in public spaces, having this identity that stresses people out who don't understand who I am. But I feel good in my own skin.
I want to ask you about how much of that is a spiritual thing and how much of that is a political thing. But we will continue this in a moment. If you are listening to this at home and you want to get involved, you can always text us on 81869. You can tweet at BBC Asian Network. We are asking, does it make you less of a Sikh if you remove your hair?
BBC Asian Network.
Mubin Azhar.
And this is me, and we are asking if removing your body hair, cutting your hair, tweezing, plucking, trimming, any of that stuff makes you less of a Sikh. I'm really pleased to have Damneet and Jasmin in studio, and I'm now joined by Sukhdeep Singh, and Sukhdeep is from the Basics of Sikhi. Sukhdeep, welcome to the Asian Network.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I want you to just go in there for the kill and answer that question for me. Does it make you less of a Sikh if you remove your hair?
So the thing is, when it comes to this question and we come to the idea of Sikhi is not black and white. So every single situation that we can think about is different for every single individual. So for me to say now that if you cut your hair, that makes you less of a Sikh, but it depends on the individual, because that person could be doing so many prayers, for example, and there could be another person who's keeping their hair, whether that's a he or she, but they may be doing no prayers. So then all we're doing right now is like ticking certain boxes, and saying that this makes you more of a Sikh if you do these things, and this makes you less of a Sikh if you don't do these things, for example. And the way I'm trying to take this is that when it comes to Sikhi, we're not here to judge each other. We're here to actually educate each other and mainly focus on the things that we can do to increase, we call it the Jivan of a Sikh, so the life of a Sikh. So when it comes to answer this question, I don't think you can give a yes or no because it depends on the situation that the person is going through at that time.
I love a yes or a no, but I understand. So you're saying it's really about kind of morality and praying and those other things. It's not about outward appearance. Is that right?
No. It's definitely about the outward appearance.
It is about outward appearance. Okay.
You can't pick one over the other. They're both really important. But what we always try to recommend is that whatever you can do that for now, and then later on we can start to worry about these things as well. So right now, if you're not praying, for example, if you're not coming into holy company, so for example, I think it was Jasmin Kaur, she was talking about that when she went to the cause camp, that really inspired her now to actually think about keeping her hair. And that's what we need to do. When we start to come into that company and we start to do our prayers and hang around people who are like us, that keep their hair as well, then that will make us feel like that we want to keep our hair now, give us that confidence as well, and help us to stay away from the worldly pressures that we see people
Sure.
face.
Sukhdeep, I do want to ask you though, because that all sounds really sensible and nice and caring and all those things. But on a level, I want to ask you, if you are walking down the street and you see a fellow Sikh and they have removed hair, is there a part of you that would make a judgment? And Damneet, I notice you smiling there, so I'll bring you in a second, but Sukhdeep, go for it.
Personally, 100% not, because myself, I'm 23 years old, and for the first 19 years of my life, I used to cut my hair. It's only the past 3 years I actually started to keep my hair, so I know what it's like to be in that situation. And the last thing anyone should be doing who's a part of Sadh Sangat, that means holy company, true company, they should not be judging anybody else because we don't know what that person is going through in their life. So 100% I would not judge anyone for what they're going through. Obviously, I promote people keeping their hair. I'd say to them, you should keep your hair. But I understand at the same time it takes time and there's things we can put in place in terms of praying and coming into company with people who do keep their hair. And slowly that person may start to keep their hair later on as well.
But there is an element of judgment there, isn't there? Because if what you're saying is, I'm not going to judge you right now, and fingers crossed one day you'll kind of find the right path. Isn't there an element of judgment there? I don't know, Damneet, what do you think?
Oh, no. The reason I was smiling was because having grown up with no Sikhs around me, anytime I do see a Sikh, whether their hair is cut or not, I just get so happy. So I think I was just smiling because I know that if I saw a Sikh, I wouldn't judge. And more so, I just get happy that this is Sangat, this is community, and I'm thankful that you exist.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're grateful and happy just to see another Sikh. It doesn't really matter the kind of level of practice and the level of outward practice. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, but that's also my personal experience because I didn't grow up with a lot of Sikhs around. So anytime I saw someone who reminded me of myself and people who looked right like my community, it was just a beautiful thing to do, see.
And just briefly though, why should that matter? Ultimately, aren't we all just people? I'm being all a bit Stevie Wonder, Ebony and Ivory here, but aren't we all just people? Why does it matter that you see other Sikhs?
I think it matters because we are a community of resistance, right? And to know that we've come this far and I can see someone who looks like me is an affirmation that we can exist in this world and we have the right to exist in this world.
Okay, I want to continue this in a little bit, and I want to get into some of the politics of it. We've had a tweet in from Damneet Kaur who says, it depends on how you see yourself as a Sikh. If you see yourself as distant from the religion, then body hair shouldn't be the first of your worries. Getting a better understanding of the religion should. So that on one level, that seems kind of really open-minded. On another level, it's basically saying if you have cut your hair, then maybe you're distant from the religion and you need to educate yourself a bit more. I don't know, reading between the lines, in my gut, I get a little bit of feeling of judgment there. You might disagree. You can get in touch with us on 81869. You can tweet at BBC Asian Network. We will continue this. It's just coming up to 11 o'clock.
BBC Asian Network.
Mabeen Azhar.
Yep, it is. And we are talking about body hair and hair generally, particularly on the Sikh body. And we are asking if removing that hair makes you any less of a Sikh. You can get in touch with us on 81869. You can tweet at BBC Asian Network. I've got Jasmin Kaur and Damneet in studio. And I've got Sukhdeep Singh on the line. Sukhdeep, just one more question for you. This text that we had in, or the tweet that we had in rather, seemed to be suggesting that it is ultimately about personal choice. But there was this idea that if you have not got body hair, then maybe, just maybe, you need to go and develop a better understanding of the religion. Now, reading between the lines, and, I don't know the intention of the person that tweeted in, isn't there an element of judgment there? Aren't we basically saying if someone isn't outwardly appearing a particular way, they've just said it's not a feeling of judgment, but more of a personal journey to get to where you want. If you're not growing body hair, but praying, people will not see that. Becoming a better Sikh is your own journey and decision. It shouldn't be for others to decide. So that all sounds lovely, but my question to you then is, please explain to someone who's not from a Sikh faith, why does it matter at all? Isn't it surely just about outward appearance? Why does it matter?
So the thing is, first of all, is that all we're trying to do is encourage someone to keep their hair and to support that person. We're not trying to judge anyone in any situation because, like we said, everyone's journey is different. Now, when we just look at this question about if you want to talk about other people who are not from a Sikh faith, why do we keep our hair? Sometimes you can ask the question, why does somebody actually cut their hair? So what's the reason for us actually needing to cut our hair? Is it because we want to look a certain way? These kind of questions that we can ask. But the thing for me, one of the most beautiful things I always talk about ghais. So just to let everyone know, first of all, ghais actually means uncut hair. It doesn't mean hair. So it actually means to have uncut hair. And the thing that's so beautiful about hair is that when we actually listen to something beautiful, like a nice song, what happens to your hair? Do you know what happens to it?
No, it stands on end, I guess.
Yeah, it stands up, right? So it stands up, and we call it goosebumps, right? Mm-hmm. So there's like energy going into your hair. And this all links back to the spiritual side. This is why they come together, and we cannot pick one over the other. But if we have one, that's great, but we need both. Because when we start to meditate and we start to listen to divine songs, the divine hymns of Guru Bani, the words of our Guru, even our hair starts to vibrate as well. And even our hair starts to sing those praises as well. So this is why the hair is so important for a spiritual side, but also for a practical side, because a Sikh is meant to live in the world and a Sikh is meant to stand out in society. And just one point I want to finish off with is when someone starts to learn more about the Sikh faith, I'm not saying if someone doesn't have hair, they don't know about the Sikh faith, they may know a lot. But the thing is that when we look at the history and we look at some of the Sikhs, they'll rather have their actual head whipped off and have their gears come out of their head, so the scalp. They'd rather have their scalp cut off than actually remove their hair from their head.
Is that important to them?
Yeah, there's someone called Pai Tauru Singh, and we just remembered their sacrifice they make. And we have to ask ourselves the question, what do they see in their gears? How much do they love their gears that they'd rather have their scalp taken off than lose that hair upon their head? And there's many stories we can talk about. So that's just to put a seed in our mind that what is so special about this gears? And maybe we should try it ourselves. So, sorry, I said last point. This will be the last point.
You said that 2 points ago. Sukhdeep, come on.
But this is the last
Wind it up.
This is the last. I'm wrapping up right now. When it comes to Sikhi, we're not here to say to you, believe what we're saying. We're here to say to you, experience it yourself. So why don't you try keeping your hair? Why don't you try doing this, doing that, and say God's name, and you'll see the difference yourself. Experience it within the right company.
Sukhdeep, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Jasmin and Damneet, I completely hear what Sukhdeep's saying, but I want to ask you about the politics of this, because one of the things you've both spoken about is this idea of seeing other Sikhs and Sikhs being an identity. Now, I know from a Muslim perspective, I think quite often things like beards and hijabs have been detached from their spirituality. They become political symbols. I know that being part of that community. Do you think there's an equivalent in the Sikh community?
So for context, within the Sikh faith, politics and spirituality are not something you can divorce. So as Sikhs, we have always been a political people since our inception, starting from Guru Nanak, who challenged tyrannical rulers. That is a political act for a spiritual leader to participate in. From Guru Arjan Dev Ji, who gave up his life challenging a Mughal ruler who was trying to dictate who was allowed to speak about their faith. Guru Arjan Dev Ji gave up his life defending free speech. Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, the 9th Sikh Guru, gave up their life defending Hindu pandits who were...
I get that, but Jasmin, what I want to bring it back to, and I'm just being practical here, is, people of all faiths. So people who are Christian would say Jesus was primarily a politician. And of course he was. He made political moves. Muhammad was primarily a politician, and so forth and so forth. I'm talking about in a contemporary context today. These often become symbols that I know. I'm just going to put this out there because this is the fact of it. I've got friends who are Sikhs who want to be seen as Sikhs, are very proud of their turbans, but have no issue, for example, with being really drunk or with womanizing. Similarly, I know Muslims who want to be seen as Muslims, who will grow their beards, but then, don't have a job or smoke a lot of weed. Do you know what I mean? So what I'm saying is that identity for them is not about history. It's about now. It's about them marking a line and saying, I am the other. If you are scared of Muslims, I am one of the Muslims. If you have a problem with Sikhs, this is who I am. And I'm asking you to be introspective here. In terms of the Sikh community, do you think that's an issue?
I think that's just a human issue in general. I don't think it's a Sikh issue or a Muslim issue. And I think that I can't dictate or tell you what is inside of someone else's heart. I can only tell you what's going on inside of me. I can only tell you why I choose to have this identity. So my dastard, for example, my turban as a Sikh, I chose to start tying that in the 12th grade, and it was a political act. So I've always had my case. I've always been visibly different, and I've always had people looking at me because I'm different. But it was when I started tying my dastard that I decided that I was going to control that gaze. I wasn't just going to be stared at. I'm going to make you look at me because I feel okay in this body. So I think that being visible as a Sikh is an important aspect of who we are. And it's something that I draw a lot of internal strength and spiritual strength from as well.
Sure, but this is brilliant. So when you say it was a political act, was there an element of that? You spoke about being in the 9th grade earlier and people pointing at you. Was there an element of it which was a middle finger up saying, if you're going to look at me, I might as well give you something to look at. So here you go.
I love that you just said that, because what you just said is exactly what I always say about my dastard. I'm going to give you a reason to look at me. And I think that's okay. It's okay to find your strength in different ways. And that's where I found my confidence from in a lot of ways.
Completely. I really appreciate that. I want to bring in Sat Baines now, who's all the way in Leicester. Sat, welcome to the Asian Network. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Tell me about your journey. I know you've been through a few different incarnations with your hair, so tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've basically had the long hair, as you would say, and the whole journey didn't work out for me, so I ended up going back to what I was prior, basically. Then I went back to cutting my hair short. It's just I didn't feel comfortable.
You just didn't feel comfortable with it. So now where are you? What's your hair looking like right now?
Right now? Yeah. Believe it or not, it's actually relatively long, actually. It's tied up in a man bun, but that's about it.
Okay, in a man bun. So would you say this is like an East London kind of hipster man bun, or is it like a Sikh man bun? Which one is it?
I don't know. I don't really follow trends like that way. I just put it up.
Okay, but how does this tie in? What I'm getting at is, how does this tie in with your Sikh identity? Does it? Or for you, is it just whatever feels right?
I think it's too simplistic to say if, having long hair makes you a better Sikh or not. I think being a Sikh is such a broad thing, and to just narrow it down to having long hair, I don't think you could easily do it. I don't think it's possible. I think more importantly is where your head's at, and is your mind, is your heart, is your focus on the one, the force, the energy.
So it's where your head's at, not where your hair's at. Is there? But tell me this. I want you all to
start off where's your head at.
Yeah.
But then eventually, as being a Sikh, community, eventually, once you're in the right frame of mind, you might end up thinking, you know what? I'd like to grow my hair. I want to grow it. And then you do probably end up going down that path where you do grow your hair. But then you might be somebody who's not born as a Sikh, but they like certain practices of Sikhs. And thought, I like certain practices, but I just don't want to really grow my hair. And they'll just take certain aspects of it. But you wouldn't, as a Sikh, you wouldn't actually condemn the other person, because that's not what a Sikh does.
I understand. Sat, thank you so much for getting in touch. I really appreciate it. Classic Singh has been in touch on Twitter. And Classic Singh says, having uncut hair is a direct message to society that a Sikh is unique. But this uniqueness is a natural uniqueness, not adulterated by worldly customs. For example, shaving and cutting of hair, natural looks, smiley face. Experience them. That's the way to go. And then we've had another text in from Jaspreet who says, Kesh, are beautiful. Kesh is beautiful. I say Kesh, don't I? Kesh is beautiful. We need to learn how diseaseless we are when we have uncut hair. Diseaseless, I think. Also, being natural is beautiful. Uncut hair makes Sikhs unique, and they are the flags that can be identified easily so we can serve humanity. That's from Jaspreet Singh. I want to ask you, Sat was saying there, it's not about, and this seems to be a prevailing theme, it doesn't really matter, it's where your head's at, but then you should aspire ultimately to have, to have kesh and not to cut your hair. So if that is the case, and this might be a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm just going to ask you, is there sometimes a hierarchy within Sikh society? And let me contextualize that. I know sometimes Muslim men with beards, if you go to Friday prayers, we'll check each other out. And if you've got a longer beard, I know we'll think, oh yeah, he must be in a particular place. He must really know his stuff. Similarly, Muslim women with hijabs, there's a hierarchy there. Sometimes there is. You just can't deny it. There is a hierarchy. If there's a Muslim woman whose hijab has a bit of hair coming out, then sometimes she will be judged. And so in the Sikh community, is there an equivalent?
I think there's judgment in every community, right? And I think there is judgment currently in our community. And I think that's why Sukhdeep had spoken up on this, is to educate our community, right? And we do it with love, right? You got to check folks in instead of call them out. And so if there's hierarchy, right, having those conversations like we're having today about, well, why is there hierarchy? Why do we feel like if someone does keep kesh and, maybe then they are better Sikh, right? And also I would say educating our children, because we don't educate our children on keeping kesh. We kind of tell our kids, right, oh, do this, do that. In every religion, I would assume, right? We kind of force religion down kids' throats, but we don't explain the reasons why we do it. And so that's why conversations like this is important, right? Mm-hmm. Why do Sikhs keep kesh? And if you do want to keep kesh, like, how can we be on that journey together, or how can I support you in that journey, instead of being like, if you don't keep kesh, you're a bad Sikh, quote unquote, right? So I think yes, there's hierarchy, but like there is in any community, like you said.
It is in every community. I understand. And this comes back to the political thing. I was speaking to Bobby Friction, who does the show before me, and we were chatting about this. And he was saying to me, he really wants to know, in his experience, and he's of my generation, he says, growing up, his dad always cut his hair. It was just something that he'd do. Bobby cuts his hair. But he sees lots of his contemporaries now, so young Sikhs, not cutting their hair and wearing the turban and having a beard, even though the first generation didn't do that. Mm. So do you think that is about a community just being more confident in its identity? Or do you think it's about asserting difference and saying, look, as Classic Singh said, it's about being a flag. It's about saying, look, we are here, look at us, we're here.
I think it's about not even confidence, it's about that community, right? We have access to the internet now. We have access to each other in different ways where we can have these conversations. I can speak on my personal experience. My parents, we didn't, enforcing religion wasn't the first thing, right? Like, it was more about survival when they first moved to the US. It was about putting food on the table. So we didn't really discuss religion the way, it was more about do what you got to do to live in this world. And a part of it was assimilating, right? So that we could survive. But now, thankfully, and I'm grateful that I've gone to a point where I can have these conversations. I think it's really about the education that we have, and not beyond institutions and academic language, but the conversations and dialogues Sikhs are having with each other, and young Sikhs especially like me and Jasmin, we're very different visibly, right? But we have conversations every day on how we can both support each other as Sikh women in our journey to be, I guess, quote unquote, whatever better Sikh looks like for us.
Sure. I want to bring you in, Jasmin, but in a little bit, because I want you to hear, we spoke to Harry and Jeshan earlier, and they had a little chat about their different take on their hair.
Hello, my name is Harry, and today I'm at Bullring with my best friend, Jasmin.
Hello, my name is Jasmin, and I'm at Bullring with Harry, my best friend, Harry.
So I'll probably tell him to do turban and keep hair very well, so you can follow our guru teachings and be more successful in your life.
I do want to follow, but like now, I've never done turban, so I don't even know how to do turban and that. And I'm usually wake up like pretty late, so I just don't have enough time to do that turban and that.
So basically, sometimes I tease him, because people every time see us sing, they respect us sing, and haircut guy, something like that, because they know the guy with the turban can be trusted. We got our own identity, a unique identity from standing whole out of a crowd.
And I might start doing it like later on, but right now I'm just not ready for it, because you have to wake up every day and do it. Like if you want to just go out, you have to do the turban. You can't just go without it.
This is BBC Asian Network.
We are going to be continuing this chat about hair and asking if you are any less of a Sikh if you remove it. Stick with us. You can text us on 81869.
BBC Asian Network.
Mubin Azhar.
That was Anushka with Ecstasy. She sounded very, very excitable, didn't she? Tonight we are talking about hair on the bodies of Sikhs and asking, are you any less of a Sikh if you remove that hair? I've got Jasmin and Damneet in the studio, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Kaur. Manj, welcome to the Asian Network.
Hello, Mubin.
How are you doing? Are you okay?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on your radio show.
No, it's great to have you. Great to have you. So tell me about your journey, because I understand you decided to get closer to your religion a couple of years ago in
That's
2016.
correct,
Is that
yeah.
right? Tell me how you got there.
Okay, I started off in October 2015. I decided that I was going to take Amrit the following April, so around Vaisakhi time. I spoke to my brother-in-law, and he said, obviously it's a big decision. Take your time. Make sure, this is what you want, because once you've made that decision, you can't turn back. Mm-hmm. So over time, so in October 2015, I stopped.
So just to say, sorry, I need to jump in. For anyone that doesn't understand, Amrit is it the equivalent of baptism? Yeah? Is that fair enough to say? Okay, yeah, please continue.
So in October 2015, I stopped my facial grooming. So I stopped my threading of my eyebrows and my lip. And then by December 2015, I stopped the waxing around my body. Mm-hmm. And then in February 2016, I took my Amrit, and from there onwards, I've obviously not, groomed in any form of way, so not removed any hair. And I've been quite fortunate. I'm not very hairy, but, obviously I get the hair on my chin. But other than that, I'm very confident with the way I look.
Manji, you're happy.
I am.
You are. Why was it important to you? Why was it important to you to have facial hair, to have body hair? Tell me why that's important.
To have it?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we've been talking about this idea of it being an identifying thing. We had someone text in earlier, or tweet in rather, who said, if you are a Sikh and you are outwardly Sikh, then you are a representative. They use the word flag. You're like a flag for the Sikh people. Is that part of it for you? Do you like being identified as Sikh?
I do like to be identified as a Sikh, especially, being identified, with my dastard, because I've, obviously grown my gesh. So, yeah, I do. I'm very proud of being a Sikh.
And what about if someone comes to you for advice now? What advice would you give them in terms of if they said, look, I'm thinking of getting baptised, I'm thinking of taking Amrit in a few months, what advice would you give them?
I mean, I find that as a female perspective, it is a lot harder because we are very vain. We do our threading. It's easier for a male to grow his beard, but for a female, it's obviously the facial hair, because everybody will see your face, your eyebrows, your lips. So, like the ladies mentioned, it is the first thing that, people will notice on your face. But I would always recommend everybody to start 3 months before, stop any kind of grooming, and just let, see how you feel. It's about confidence. It's about believing in yourself. And at the end of the day, when you start believing in yourself and you believe in that you are only doing this for your guru, you'll be happy on your journey.
Minds, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I really, really appreciate it. Jasmin, it's really interesting when Mind said it's more difficult for a woman. And the way she said obviously, and I understand exactly what she's saying, but it just really got me thinking about your initial point and the idea of decolonizing the body, because there's an argument that it's only more difficult for a woman because we expect women in our society and in the world today to be hair-free, to have a particular kind of skin, to be soft like a flower, in a Bollywood film, all that kind of stuff. So is part of this for you, is part of it feminism?
Absolutely. I think one thing that I often think about is, why is it that society judges women for every aspect of their physical form? Why is it that I can't be as womanly as someone else if I have this identity, if I have a turban on my head, if I have this thought on my head, or if I have facial hair or whatever it is? Why is it that my femininity needs to fit into a very European idea of what is beautiful? And it expands beyond hair as well.
And I have to say, I think, in my opinion, it expands beyond Europe because, look at India. Do you know what I mean? Look at where we are.
I think the question is also, what does a woman look like, right? A woman isn't just one box of being, right? We all come in different ways. And some of us have more body hair, some of us don't. And there's all these other, identity is so complex. And we assume that it can be as simple as, a lighter skinned person with no body hair.
Yeah, okay. Jasmin, I like that. Jasmin, could you, I know you are a spoken word artist, and so I'd like you to pick something out of your repertoire that's relevant to our conversation today. And if you could perform for us, that would be great.
Yeah, so this piece that I have here, it was something I actually wrote when I was living in London as a study abroad student. And I am the kind of person where I am hyper aware of people's gaze. So I'm not just kind of like obliviously going around this earth. And it was inspired by being on the tube and just having all these eyes on me, and that kind of those insecurities that come back when you feel people looking at you and you just want to know, what is it about me that like draws your gaze? So it goes back to what I said before. Self-love is not some linear journey where you begin insecure and you end in love with yourself. It's a up and down thing. So this kind of speaks to that up and down journey for me. Sunday. You catch the corner of a mirror and can't help but notice the strand of hair. Always bolder, always louder than before. But you tell yourself that there are flowers growing from your chin. Monday. The tube is a cacophony of stories, humans as lost and hopeful as you, and you can't help but weave stories of their struggles between each stop, but their eyes drown in your sight. He glares. You smile back. Tuesday. You find yourself consumed with glass, rectangles and squares and prisms and shards that are always painful no matter the dullness of the edges. Wednesday, she turns to you in class. After months of small talk, she musters up the nerve to say, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" You nod. You already know what it is. Thursday. You're trying to hide from glass, but your body was not made only to run. Friday. You stumble upon mirror, but before you can escape, you catch a glimmer of light. There is something glowing just beneath the surface of the being before you. Saturday. You crown yourself, this time taller, this time willfully. You seek all the stories locked between each layer of softened cloth. Today, these stories are enough. Sunday. you encounter flowers scattered across your skin. For the first time, you stop to sit amongst them.
Thank you so much. That was lovely. Are you still performing whilst you're here? Or are you leaving soon?
Yeah, so we have one more show. We are hosting Decolonize Your Body in Birmingham this Friday. So I'll be hosting a workshop at 3:30 at Impact Hub, and then the show starts at 6:30 at Impact Hub. And all those details are on our Instagrams. So you can find me on Instagram at Jasmin, Jusmun.
Thank you.
Find me on Instagram at _DKAUR.
Thank you, Damneet and Jasmin. Thank you both for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure.